It is my pleasure to welcome all of you and to say this series of programs is certainly near and dear to my heart, that we are able to help share the story of Muscle Shoals music to the world. And so our programs are being recorded. You'll be able to find them on YouTube, and you'll be able to share those with your friends and let them know about it. But it wouldn't be possible today without, number one, the Muscle Shoals, the W.C. Handy Music Festival and all the great work that it does, and also our friends of the library who help support these efforts. And then today, this program is made possible also because Andreas Werner is here to help conduct the interview. Thanks, and to invite our wonderful guest here to be with us. And I've grown up with these people. I've listened to them forever and ever. My children have grown up with some of them, so their children. So anyway, it is our pleasure to have these guys here today. And without any further ado, I will introduce. Oh, before we do that, we've got another special guest in the house to talk about a really cool new project that he's working on and a library program that we'll pull into that down the road. But let's welcome George Lair, who has worked with all these guys for a lot of years too. Come on.
George Lair. I worked at the Alabama Music Hall of Fame as curator for almost 10 years, and it's always been one of my goals to acquaint people with some of the musicians and artists from the state of Alabama who have been forgotten or are just not as widely known. And so in conjunction with the Alabama Music Hall of Fame and the W.C. Handy Festival, I've compiled a list of jazz legends of Alabama. There are 38 biographies in here of some remarkable people who are from the state of Alabama. Just to give you a little sample, there was a fellow by the name of James Europe who was born back at the turn of the century. All right, somebody knows him. He was the first band leader to do any of W.C. Handy's music. And he also formed the first black musicians union in New York. He formed a brigade for World War I, went over to Europe, played over there, popularized jazz there, became General Pershing's favorite band, and when the troops came back to the U.S., he led the parade in New York City. So, remarkable individual, and he's from Mobile, Alabama. There are all sorts of folks. Johnny Smith, guitar player, who wrote Moonlight Over Vermont, which was the best-selling jazz single for a long time. And some of you might remember the song Walk, Don't Run. He also did that. John Collins was another guitar player who played with Nat King Cole for about 14 years and was recognized by the Smithsonian for his contribution to jazz music. So anyway, a lot of interesting facts about these people in these biographies. I have these for sale for $5. If you'd like to see me after the program, I'll make myself available for that. Thank you.
All right. Before we start, I would like to thank you for coming out this morning. I would like to thank Nancy Sanford and the library. And also I would like to thank Travis and Jerry McGee for helping me get this panel together. One quick announcement: this afternoon at 3 o'clock, Travis and Microwave Dave will perform at the Florence Tourism Visitor Center. It's going to be a smaller room and packed, so if you want to see that show, you have to get there plenty early. All right, well, when Nancy asked me to put together a couple panels for the library, I was very, very much thrilled because I get a chance to hear some of my favorite stories told by some of my favorite musicians and people. And it's really a very selfish reason to do this, but I'm very glad that you are all sharing my interest, as it looks like. So I'm very honored and certainly humbled to be able to share the stage with some of the kings of my record collection. They are by any means some of the most important guitar players in American music history. There's no doubt about that. The amount of records they played on is amazing, and it's really almost unbelievable. And before we let them talk, I would like to introduce them real quickly, and I would also like to mention that obviously we were not able to have all the great session guitar players here. There are many others active and also of the past, and I just want to name a few: Junior Lowe, Terry Thompson, Tippy Armstrong, Dwayne Allman, Eddie Hinton, Ken Bell, Wayne Perkins, and many, many other great guitar players that came through this area. But we've certainly got some of the cream of the crop here, and I would like to start by introducing Pete Carr. Pete was born in Daytona Beach, Florida, and he got part of his earlier music career included a stint in the band Hourglass with Dwayne and Greg Allman before they formed the Allman Brothers Band. Besides doing a lot of sessions here in Muscle Shoals, he worked in many other music cities like Macon, Georgia, Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. And his guitar playing can be heard on albums, and this is just a very, very brief list. Go on allmusic.com and check out the whole list. But like Paul Simon, There Goes Rhyming Simon album, Simon and Garfunkel concert in Central Park, Barbra Streisand's Guilty albums, and albums by Rod Stewart and Bob Seger, including memorable guitar licks on Main Street, Tonight's the Night and Sailing by Rod Stewart, If Loving You Is Wrong by Luther Ingram, Torn Between Two Lovers, acoustic guitar, by Mary McCracken. Please, wait. That's not even it. And I'll try to be short. He also had a career as an artist with Lenny LeBlanc. They had to do a LeBlanc car, and they had a big hit with Falling, and he released 2 solo albums in the late 70s called Not a Word on It and Multiple Flash. Please welcome Pete Carr.
Thank you.
And he recently moved back to this area, which we're all very, very delighted. All right. Travis Wammack was born in Walnut, Mississippi, and spent a lot of time in Memphis. After that, he wrote and recorded his first song at 11 years old, and had a hit with the instrumental Scratchy at 17. After that, he recorded a lot of singles and albums for many labels, including Fame and Capricorn, and he came down here to do a lot of sessions, especially at Fame, including Clarence Carr's Patches, Bobby Gentry's Fancy, the Osmonds Wombat Apple, and he can be heard on albums by Aretha Franklin, Tony Joe White, Little Richard, Lou Rawls, Mac Davis, and many others. He also has been a songwriter and wrote, among other things, Greenwood, Mississippi, that was recorded by Little Richard and Tom Jones. He co-wrote that with Junior Lowe, who's another great session guitar player. And after that, he was Little Richard's lead guitar player and band leader from 1984 to 95, I believe. Please welcome Travis Wammack.
Thank you.
Jimmy Johnson was born in Sheffield, Alabama, so he's really local. He was Rick Hall's first employee at Fame and became the rhythm guitar player for Fame's second rhythm section, which became the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, also featuring Barry Beckett, David Hood, and Roger Hawkins. Besides playing on sessions, he also produced and engineered, and he engineered When a Man Loves a Woman by Percy Sledge, turning those knobs as Percy was singing, and also Brown Sugar and Wild Horses by the Rolling Stones. His guitar playing can be heard on albums and hit songs by Aretha Franklin, Percy Sledge, Wilson Pickett, staple singers Paul Simon, Rod Stewart, Bob Seger, and I could go on for another 10 minutes, but we'll let them talk now. Please welcome Jimmy Johnson.
And Leonard Skinner.
And Just kidding. My bad, but I'm sure you get to talk about them a little bit here later too.
They were a band that came to me through Alan Walden, and I got the privilege of signing them to their first contract.
Very cool. And
That's been a real blessing in my whole life, I'll tell you.
And interesting enough, and you will see later here, there's some really interesting connections that Pete was part of that legendary tour when the plane crash happened. They were opening for Lynyrd Skynyrd then, and I also just found out preparing that you actually got influenced by Travis's Scratchy record. So if we maybe can start with you, Pete, and just like, how did you get into music and how did it all got started for you?
Well, my brother-in-law had a guitar, and I just played around with it and started getting interested in it, and listened to the radio, tried to copy the records on the radio. One of them being Scratchy when I was little, I heard this sound like lightning going through the air, and I was like, wow, I got to try to at least learn a tenth of this. And it was Travis. I, of course, met him here years later. And went right out and bought the 45, went home, sat on the edge of the bed, kept putting the needle back and forth and trying to play it. And it was the hottest thing I had heard at the time. And he came to town and played at the pier over the, I don't know if you remember that, over the ocean. I said, all right, I get to go see him in purpose. And he was, I got fairly close to the stage. And I just, washed his fingers all the time. I don't know if I bugged you or not. He probably didn't remember me out there, but that's how I was introduced to Travis and some early music while I was learning.
How
Thank
about
you, Pete.
Thank you.
How about you, Travis? How did you get started?
Well, my family was very, very poor, and my daddy came home with the guitar back when I was about 8 years old. And I had 3 sisters, 3 brothers, and he said, here's a guitar. Any of y'all want to try to learn how to play it? Here it is. He played a little bit. So I picked that thing up, started playing, and I would, we lived in a little suburb of Memphis, Tennessee called Binghamton. And every afternoon when I'd come in from school, I'd get my guitar and I'd go down to this little area in a busy street, and I'd go in every place down there playing my guitar. People would put money in my guitar. And there's a couple of beer joints, I'd go in them, I'd stand with a jukebox. Somebody come up there to play something, I'd say, hey, what are you fixing to play? And they'd tell me, I said, well, I can play that. So back then I think it was like a dime for a jukebox. So they'd put the dime in my guitar. Well, one day I'm walking down the street and this guy walks up to me and he said, son, can you play that guitar? And I said, yes, sir. And I said, I sang too. And he said, let me hear you. So I played him a song. He said, my name's Eddie Bond. He said, I'm a DJ here in town. He said, I'd like to, he said, I have a lot of, back then they called these shows jamborees. He said, I'd like to get you to play some of these jamborees. And I said, well, you need to come talk to my mom and daddy. So he went to talk to them. Of course, that was a station they listened to. And he was like a top DJ there. Also, he was a rockabilly singer. He had a hit record back then called Rockin' Daddy. But anyway, I started opening these jamborees for him, and back then I was like 10 years old, and there'd be people like Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, all the Dorsey Burnett brothers, all the people there in Memphis, and I'd open the show for them, and didn't have an electric guitar, but I was playing electric guitar, and every show Eddie Bond would go back in the dressing room. He'd say, somebody in here let Travis borrow electric guitar. I can remember one night we was doing a show with Carl Perkins, and Eddie went back there and he said, hey, little Travis, that's what they call me because I was about that tall. Somebody let him borrow a guitar, and Carl Perkins, he said, hey, he can borrow mine. So he got it out of the case and I put it on, and that thing hung down around my ankles. And I never will forget, Carl Perkins reached in his pocket and he took a pocket knife, and he said, hold it up there, Eddie, where he can feel right to him, and he cut a hole in it where that strap would fit. I went out and played Carl Perkins' guitar that night. But Eddie Bund got me started. I had my first record I wrote when I was 11 years old, and it was on Fernwood Records, which was kind of a basement label to Sun Records. And then a couple of years later, I started playing electric guitar, and there was guitar players out there, Chet Atkins and Merle Travis, but nothing that it didn't really fit me, and so I just started teaching myself, coming up with different stuff. I built a fuzz tone out of an old tape recorder, and there was a man that was a top guitar player in Memphis at the time at Sun Records. He played on all the stuff at Sun Records, Great Balls of Fire and Jerry Lee Lewis stuff. Anyway, his name was Roland James, and he had just left Sun Records, and I started a studio, and I was cocky. I mean, I had come up with this. I had broke a string one night, and I needed a string, and this guy on the jamboree had an A tenor banjo string. That's all he had, and I put that thing on my guitar, and man, I could stretch that thing, and it sounded just awesome. So, and that's what I started using. That was before unwound strings came out. And so I went to Roland James' studio one day, and I walked in, I introduced myself. He said, "Yeah, I remember you." And I said, "Well, I want to be your session guitar player." And I was like 15. He said, "Well, Travis," he said, "I heard you play, rhythm guitar and sing, but," he said, "I never heard you play lead. Let me hear you play something." So I'd got a buddy of mine to drive me, because I didn't have driver's license anyway. Got my guitar, and I played for him. He said, "I tell you what, next Tuesday, I got Jerry Lee Lewis's bass player. I'm going to cut a session on him." And he said, "I'm going to try you out on it." So I played on it, got to work from then on up until I moved down here. I was working Roland James' studio. Then I went to work over at High Studios, doing a lot of the Bill Black combo, Ace Cannon. And I was an artist at American Studio there, where the American group, Tommy Cogwell and all them guys were. So I moved down here to Fame, and I've been here ever since about 1969, and still rocking. You need any more?
No work for now. How about you, Jimmy? How did you get started?
Well, I got started, probably my dad and my mother used to play and sing together. And my dad and my uncle, they used to have a band together. They were from Iuka, Mississippi, and my mom. And they came up here to get a job at Reynolds aluminum plant. And I was born during that period in the 40s. And but they were playing all the time, and I'm going to let the cat out of the bag now. I never have been into country music that much. Sorry about that. But all the music I liked was mainly black music. Chuck Berry, people like Bo Diddley. I mean, You Got Me Running, You Got Me Hiding, Jimmy Reed, and all those great old records. And I just couldn't get interested in playing country music guitar. And I think it kind of upset my dad a little bit. But as soon as I heard Johnny B. Good on WLAY by Chuck Berry, it was like, that was my inspiration. It was like, I got to learn how to do that. And that, from starting right there, I immediately started getting Donnie Shrigley to teach me how to play that from Spring Valley. And he was playing with a band called Hollis Dixon and the Keynotes, I was a big fan of. And but I got started that way, and then my first opportunity to work came from Rick Hall. Our band rented his studio to do a demo, and my uncle was sitting in the control room with him, and he said, "Would you ask Jimmy if he'd like to go to work for me?" Well, let me tell you what, I couldn't have thought of a better idea than that. And I became Rick Hall's first employee at that time, and I worked for Rick for 9 years. And he was an amazing guy. He was not only our big brother. He wasn't our dad. He was our big brother. But I'll have to tell you, between Rick Hall, who we consider as being the father of Muscle Shoals music. Then we met Jerry Wexler, who we call the godfather of Muscle Shoals music. And Wexler kind of turned the international light on Muscle Shoals, and Rick had showed the world just in America. But have nothing but admiration, and when the movie finally came out, I guess I know the four of us that worked with Rick a lot, we were so proud to see Rick get his due, and I'm still really glad that it happened, and proud he got his book, and looks like there's going to be a TV show now, so I'm real excited for him.
Thank you, Jimmy. Pete, well, I guess starting out, in addition to Travis, what were your inspirations as far as guitar players or other musicians, and maybe also throughout your career, or any particular musicians that have influenced you?
It was like in the mid '60s when I started playing, and a lot of the popular music, the British invasion, and that started coming. The Beatles and stuff like that. Anything on the radio, that's all I knew to hear, and I was influenced by all that, and also a lot of R&B, which really the Rolling Stones kind of turned me on to that, because on their first 2 or 3 records, they covered a lot of these songs, and R&B songs and blues songs that I haven't heard growing up on the beach in Daytona, and I said, wow, these are great songs, Then I started reading who wrote them, and when I moved up here, I actually got to play on some of the guys that wrote those songs, so that was a neat thing. And then later I heard a lot about Greg and Dwayne. They were a little older than I, and they lived right across the river from where I lived. And they came back into town, and I went to see them, and I was impressed, and I introduced myself. Greg came over and said, I was talking to him, I said, I had my guitar, I said, would you teach me some guitar licks? He said, well, that's my brother's Dwayne's department. I think you ought to, I'll introduce you to him. So he introduced me to Dwayne, and we became real tight, and with Greg too, and later on, through a few twists and turns, ended up playing in a band with him in LA called the Hourglass, and I loved Greg and Dwayne's talent, and Greg singing. And matter of fact, we came through Muscle Shoals. First time I'd been in Fame, we came through with the Hourglass, and we cut up 3 or 4 songs, one being the B.B. King medley. And I think it probably has become one of the raw rock and roll blues, first type rock and roll blues type things around that time that was cut. And we cut it to Fame, and we loved the sound. Matter of fact, I remember Jimmy, I was playing bass with him at that time, and I was playing out there trying to get a sound, and Jimmy came out, and he was just nice as he could be. He said, could you take that pick and hold it a little towards the back? You'll get a more definition on it. I said, yeah, okay. So he was into that engineering and sound stuff way back then, and I always remember that. And we cut that stuff, and it really turned out good. And from then, I just went to different places like Macon, Georgia, Miami. And Macon, Phil Walden was putting together Capricorn Studios, and also he was starting to sign artists. He had mainly been with black R&B artists, Percy Sledge. Well, Otis Redding, that was his main artist. And Otis had the plane crash a few months, I think, or maybe a year before we moved there. And he was starting to branch out into rock and roll and things like that. And he had signed Dwayne, I guess, along the way, his travels through Rick, through Wexler, and so on. And Dwayne started putting the band together, and became always. And I was interested in the studio by that time. After playing out in LA for a while, so the clubs, I said, I don't want to play the same songs every night, and this and that. And the studio, and also the engineering, and the getting to play different songs, totally different styles from one week to the next. Yeah, it was nice. You know, you go from Willie Nelson to Rod Stewart. You go, oh, cool, man. You know, I can really stretch out on this, you know. And so in the studio, I met a lot of my people that I admired through the years, like Paul Simon. When he walked in, I'm going like, wow, Paul, you know, he's here. I can't believe this. And of course, he's a little dude. You know, he walked in. I thought, but he is a fantastic songwriter, guitar player, singer. I mean, when I was a teenager, one of my idols. And other people that came through, like Rod Stewart, all those people. And we did some great records with him. And I'll turn it over to the next guy, but that's about as far as I got right now.
How about you, Travis? Who are like your influence and some of your favorite players? Maybe not just guitar players, but like artists and maybe also contemporaries that have influenced you.
In Memphis, we had, you know, R&B was really happening up there, and we at the studio we had a couple of songwriters that would come in over and cut a lot of their demos, and one of the guys' name was George Jackson. And the other man's name was Dan Greer. And I got to know them, and George, he sang, and we started doing a lot of shows together all over the South. A lot of times I remember this was back when it was pretty rough to have a black person in the band. A couple of times we had to smuggle him in at the Holiday Inn. We'd get him a little rollaway bed and hide him back there because it was just that type of situation. But as far as white, black musicians, we never, I mean, it was always just, I mean, music was universal, and that's, you know, there was never a black-white thing with us. I used to go to a couple of the black clubs in Memphis and play. I'd be the only little white guy in there, and just awesome. But I'd say George Jackson, he helped me, he taught me how to sing black, I guess you could say, a lot of feel and stuff, and then Roland James, the great guitar player that kind of took me under his wing and produced Scratchy on me. We recorded that song, and I came in with this tape recorder. I'd come up with this sound, and I told him, I said, I've got a sound here, man. You know, and I let him hear it. He said, I don't know, man. That sounds different. I said, well, that's what I'm looking for. And I said, that's the sound. What I did, I took my Fender Super Reverb amplifier, and I took a speaker cable and I put alligator clamps on the end of it, and I plugged it into one of my JBL 10-inch speakers, and it had a 1/4 inch. I run it into the tape recorder and overloaded it, and that was the sound I used on Scratchy. Wow. We cut that thing, and we was trying to get a deal on it. So at the time, Chet Atkins was A&R guy at RCA. So Roland James sent him a reel-to-reel. Back then it was reel-to-reel copy of it, and he sent us a letter back about a week later, and all the letter said was, Roland, this scares me, I pass. So we started just going out and getting a bunch of the secondary radio stations playing it and kind of forcing the big stations to go on it. And we got in Memphis, Birmingham, and Atlanta. And one day Jerry Wexler called and he said, I want to do the distribution on Scratchy. So for my next 2 records, Atlantic did the distribution. Then Jerry called again. He said, I want Travis's instrumentals on Atlantic. So the rest of them was on Atlantic Records. And of course, I had a career in Memphis, guitar instrumentals, before I moved down here. So it was pretty cool knowing all the people I did, the shows I did. With Scratchy, I had 2 English guys, and the English thing had just hit, but there was 2 guys, Peter and Gordon. Peter Asher and Gordon Waller, they had a song that was a big hit, World Without Love. When Scratchy was a hit in England first, they heard it and they called my booking agent. They said, we want Travis's band to back us on our USA tour. So I got to do the tour with them, and I was lucky enough I wrote a couple of songs for their album. But the song they had recorded, the way they done it, Peter Asher's sister, Jane Asher, she was really a pretty lady, and I think she was doing movies. Anyway, Paul McCartney was dating her at the time. And so Paul wrote the song, War Without Love, so he gave this song to Peter and Gordon, and that's how War Without Love came about. But Peter Asher loved it so well over here in the States, he moved over here, and he's still here. He produced Leonard Ronstadt, James Taylor, a bunch of great artists, and then Gordon Waller died about 3 years ago. But that was kind of my influence, and I love when I got to go over in England. It was amazing because the stuff they were doing, a lot of the R&B stuff was stuff that we already had been doing, but it's kind of like they brought it back over here and rammed it down our throats, and we loved it.
Yeah, that scratchy sound you got, that was like one of the first electronic. When I heard that sound, I was like, man, that's part of the.
It's been documented. I've been credited with the first fuzz tone, and also the first record with reverse tape before the Beatles.
Yep,
I had a saying in it that we had reversed backwards, and Roland was such a whiz with tape, splicing tape, nobody could figure out what was being said. And of course, y'all know when something, you can't figure out what's being said, there's a lot of people figures it out what's being said, but it wasn't that.
Yeah. The wizard. You're the first guitar wizard.
16 years old.
And Jimmy, what were some of your early influences? Maybe not just as a guitar player, but also like of you becoming a person in music that wore all these different hats in the studio.
Well, I think probably I'll tell you a little about some couple of local guitar players that really inspired me. A guy by the name of Roy Cooper. He was played kind of jazz guitar, and Leonard Moore. He was kind of a country and jazz artist player. Saw my first Stratocaster guitar when he played it, and but then there was a guy in town that's playing this incredibly big Gretsch guitar. His name was Terry Thompson, and Terry Thompson was one of the most inspiring people I ever met. I've still, to this day, I've never met a guitar player, in my opinion, that had the magic he had. As a matter of fact, the Beatles and the Stones wound up cutting songs he wrote. And, right, Shout of Rhythm and Blues. And, but I'll tell you what, he was an interesting guy. Okay, I'm gonna kind of shock you a little bit. He looked like a movie star. Dwayne Eddy always looked like a big movie star, but this guy put Dwayne Eddy down, I'm gonna tell you. Rick Hall was, of course, highly responsible for Terry getting involved, but Terry was from Florence, Alabama, and Terry didn't last but till he was 24 years old. He died at 24, which is one of the biggest losses. As a matter of fact, the word I heard was that Chet Atkins thought he was one of the greatest players in the world. And that's really saying something there. And, I got to know Terry before he died and work with him as I was first learning how to clean the heads and do the things that Rick Hall taught me to do in the studio, and to demag heads and just all the chores you had to do. And but Terry Thompson played on a bunch of songs that I was trying to produce at that time. For some reason, I was trying to learn how to play and produce at the same time, I guess. And that wound up being my job even until this day. Now, I don't play as much anymore, but I'm still, believe it or not, at this age, I'm still producing records. As long as Mike Curtis goes along with that, I'm for it. And we got a real good record on Mike that we just finished that I'm really proud of. But I would say this, on every record that I've ever worked on, Rick Hall always taught me, cut the best record you possibly can. And that has been my motto. And in other words, the last record I cut is the best record I ever made. And if it ever changes from that, I'll get out of it. I'll quit. The day that I stop feeling that way, you know. But it's amazing how I know these guys know what I'm saying. The feeling you get as a producer or as a player, there's nothing like playing on sessions and producing records. You agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Drugs and alcohol. No, that natural high.
I never did any of that.
Yes.
And I don't think none of us did either. And
I didn't inhale. No.
but I did smoke cigarettes, which was really bad for you. And but anyway, with all the inspiration, I got a lot of inspiration from my partners, who was David Hood and Roger Hawkins and Barry Beckett. And I'll tell you what, working with those guys was a delight of my life. And we miss Barry now. He's not with us anymore, but Roger is basically disabled now. But David and I are still doing our best to try to keep doing it. And I miss our four, working together. And I expressly miss Roger Hawkins, I'll tell you. And anyway, that's kind of where I'm at.
So Pete, maybe, especially for the people who haven't had a chance to be part of a recording session, would you mind just kind of elaborate a little bit like a session works? Kind of, maybe from when you arrive to how it all works, kind of a typical Muscle Shoals session, I would think.
We would come in and be introduced to the artist, or if we already knew him, and you do the basic things. You set up your equipment. We'd have chord charts for the session with each song most of the time, and we'd run through them roughly. Sometimes just nothing plugged in. Just everybody would get with the artist and play and try to figure out a part pretty close that what you think would sound good on the record. Sometimes you'd have to start playing and get inspired by the other people to come up with a nice part. But it was like a team. Everybody would get in and you kind of feed off each other. You don't have to say a lot. You would ask somebody something here and there, but once you started playing, the feel, and everybody kind of, once you got used to doing it every day, everybody got to learn how to kind of read each other's minds in a way. But the feel, you could tell, this bridge, I could hear something this here. Or like you come up with, like on Main Street, on the beginning of that, it just kind of stood out to me what to do there. And it ended up being a good part. And to me, that was what I like to do, is come up with parts and sometimes put a harmony over them and sing out, introduce a record or a solo. And
I think it was called signature licks, and you were good at doing that.
Yeah, I think so. And thank you. And it was great. Like I said, with Jimmy, Roger, and David, and Barry. At that time, Barry would be he would be the center of the session as far as helping everybody with the chord charts. He'd change and things like that. But everybody put in. Jimmy do his thing on the guitar, David on the bass, Roger, impeccable, just on the drums. And the artist would come in and say, we're ready to record, or the producer. And then by that time, the engineer had moved microphones around to amplifiers and pianos and had all the levels. And we'd just start running the song down, practicing it. Sometimes we'd run it down one or two times and it'd be recorded and finished. Sometimes we'd have to stay in there, a few hours to get it just right. But we'd record it, we'd listen back to it. Like Jimmy was saying, it was so neat to play it, to play on it and you go listen to it back. And really that's when you get your real good footing in, I know what we can do. Because once you heard the whole song with the musicians, then you go out, either play something then or come back later and said, I want to put this on top of that. I got something I really hear. Did a lot of overdubbing. That's like you come back and play over the track. And that's basically it. And we'd work on it till we liked it, or to the producer or whoever was doing it liked it, and we'd be on, that's it, on to the next song.
You know, the interesting thing was that we were basically, each of us were producing our own parts. In other words, that's where we all kind of got involved in production, I guess, in the beginning. So we were producing our own part, and through the years, nobody ever really told us what to play. If you remember, you know, most of the producers or anybody, artists would come in, nobody would say, well, play this. They just wanted us to play what we played. And so that was, but the amazing thing was when we got into the business, and I know Travis knows by coming here, we were really glad when you did, by the way. And anyway, it was like you never get over playing on a session and the feeling you get. And the feeling is when you hear the playback. And when you hear the playback, because see, you only got an engineer or a producer in the control room. So, you know, you're trying to cut something that you're going to impress the world with just these one or two people in there, right? But you got to play as if you're at Carnegie Hall, you know, and you're going to turn on the world. But when you listen to that playback, that used to be our reward. To hear what we did is like, holy, did we do that? You know, I mean. And, you know, I think we kind of amazed ourselves because we never really felt like that probably we would ever do anything. And I think if it hadn't been for the group before us that we were proteges to, was Norbert Putnam and Jerry Kerrigan and David Briggs and Terry Thompson, I think that the inspiration they gave us let us know. I remember they moved to Nashville in '64, and there we were. And Rick Hall had nobody else to get but us guys, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like he had nobody else to pick from. And so it was like either us or forget it. And I don't know how it happened, but we were doing these demos on Dan Penn and Spooner Oldham. And we were cutting demos that, remember You Lost That Loving Feeling? Remember that incredible song by the Righteous Brothers? Yeah. We would cut records that sounded like that. Yeah. I mean, we would copy them and emulate them. And we didn't even have the equipment to do that. We didn't even have a compressor at Fame or Muscle Shoals Sound for many years.
What's that?
Right. And but matter of fact, when a Man Loves a Woman, I had 5 inputs, 5 knobs.
That's 5 mics.
Right, 5 mics, and each knob is as big as your hand. And it was just 5 knobs, and that was it. And which meant it was mono, 1 track. And at that time, you didn't punch in on nothing.
Well, for just 5 knobs, that was a hell of a song.
And, but Percy, the interesting thing you might have saw in the movie was a little historic thing about working with Percy on that record. I remember Percy had never sang with earphones on or anything, and he was scared to death. He was totally mortified, and he'd come in there but you know what? I think he was so scared he outdid himself, you know. And he got turned on, and then when he finally got it, it was like I had no compressors, no limiters, nothing. And I had to catch it with my hand on that knob. Now, what he was doing, he didn't know to back off when he hit a high note and get in when he needed a close, when he was singing soft. He didn't know. He would scream from one position, which meant I had to do it all in my wrist. I had to learn where he was at. and anticipate when he was going to hit it. And what would happen, these old consoles, these universal audio consoles back then, if you went 1 inch, nth past zero on the VU meter, you were in dire straits called distortion. And I mean, and so it was really hard to try to keep that needle back from zero. Yet you had to have enough level to where it could be heard and to feel good. And so it was like driving around at 90 miles an hour, never getting out of the curve, you know? It was like, you talk about exciting. And, but these are things that Rick Hall helped show me. And I remember, I don't think Rick ever meant for me to cut a hit at his studio. But anyway, I had like 3 major hits before I left Fame. And then the 4th one was When a Man Loves a Woman, which I did at Quinn Ivy's studio, another location. But it was, I think, and then that's when Rick said, well, you're not going to be engineering anymore. You just get to play, you know. Which was okay because I got paid for that. And but not that much. Back then, I think we made like $60 a session, and a session might take us a week to make, you know. And so, anyway, we didn't even worry about money. That wasn't, the thing is the feeling we got from doing it and listening back, and just, it was, I guess, you know, we turned ourselves on, I guess. I don't know.
It's like to hear something that you're playing on radio.
It's like going out for a pass and catching a touchdown.
Yeah.
It was like elated, you know?
Exactly.
Thank you, Jimmy. So Travis, besides playing a lot of sessions, you also did a lot of live work, especially for Little Richard, but also on your own as an artist. And for you, what is like the difference between being a session player versus being a live player?
Well, not bragging on myself, but it's hard to be a session player and a live player. It's 2 different ball games. You can get away with a lot being a live player.
And he does them both real good.
But studio, you know, you got to hear it back again. You playing live, well, it goes by, they ain't no tapes, and we'll run that back. I think he missed that leg, you know. But I love playing live, and, you know, I love recording, and Pete's talking about recording a studio musician, and especially the guys here and the guys in Memphis, most of us never had any kind of education in music. I mean, what we played was from the heart, not the chart. And it's just something about the feel. You have a lot of people say, you know, the Muscle Shoals sound and the Memphis sound. And there was a horn player that pretty well summed it up to me. I asked him one day, I said, what do you think the difference between the Muscle Shoals sound and the Memphis sound is? He said, about 150 miles. Because we were pretty well the same musicians in Memphis coming down here, and us going up there playing on the stuff. It's just self-taught, I think, would be the thing. And it's original stuff. And in the studio, you go in there, the musicians, one of the drummers from around here, Roger Clark, had played on a lot of hit records. He said something to me one day that made sense. He said, have you ever thought, Travis, how many of these artists we have made millionaires? And you know, stop thinking about that, Jim. And you know, I've yet to have the first one to call me up and thank me. You ever had one thank you? I had one promise me a Cadillac. As a matter of fact, Mac Davis, he came down to Fame, and he come over there, and Rick, I was the leader of the session. Rick said, go out there and see what Mac wants to do. So I went out there and I said, what do you want to do, Mac? He said, look here, I've had a lot of success as a songwriter. He said, you know, I've written In the Ghetto, Whoever Finds This. He said, but I want to be an artist. I want to be a star. And he said, you guys are hot right now. If y'all could cut a hit record on me He said, I know it sounds like I'm blowing smoke, but he said, I would buy every one of you musicians a Cadillac. And I said, well, Mac, I don't, we're cutting a lot of good stuff right now, we'll see. About 3 weeks later, he had the #1 record in the USA, Baby, Baby, Don't Get Hooked on Me. And about that time, he called Rick Holland. He said, Rick, I need Travis, the drummer and the bass player. He said, I'm opening for Jack Benny at the Sahara. And he said, I want to really go over good. He said, I need him. I'm going to be out here for 2 weeks. Could you let him loose? So he asked us, he said, y'all want to go to Vegas? Yeah. So before we left, the other musicians, they said, hey, ask him where our Cadillacs are. So we get out there, and it's about the second night before I got to talk to him. I said, Mac, you promised if we cut a #1 record on you, you'd bounce on a Cadillac. I said, you've been #1 for about 2 weeks. He said, well, you misunderstood me, Travis. What I'm going to do, I'm going to buy one Cadillac, I'm going to send it down to Fame, and you guys can take time driving. We ain't seen it yet either. But, I started out, I guess I'm going to probably tell how old I am, but in Memphis, we didn't have headphones in the studio. This was before headphones. And recording, you just sit real close together in there. And we were a single track machine. And if we overdub, had another little machine. And Roland James was such a great engineer, this second generation tape, he knew exactly how to EQ that thing to where you wouldn't be real bassy sounding. Some of the records I listened to him that were cut back in, and it's just amazing how good an engineer he was. But then, being able to go from there, single track machine, all the way up to now to these Pro Tools where you redo one word, it's very educational for me. We've come a long ways.
So Jimmy, I guess there are some guitar players that are more all-rounders, and there's some guitar players, for example, like B.B. King, who is pretty much a specialist. He's really great at those beautiful single notes, runs, and you were also specialist as you're very, very much the rhythm guitar player. And in order, I guess, to fill out the sound of the Muscle Shoals rhythm section, you had to hire different other players, including Eddie Hinton, including Pete, including Will McFarlane. What were you trying to find in a guitar player that you would think would complement what you were doing in the rhythm part?
First, let me tell you what I think about the importance of a lead guitar player. Oh, hello. Anyway, I guess I'm still asleep. The interesting thing is that you learn how to play really, we didn't do it for money. We love to make the money, but we were doing it for, like I said, the participation of playing on it. And I think that most of the hits that we made, I don't even think we knew it when we cut one. And I think musicians are not the best people to tell you what a hit is. I know that, I don't know if that would ring with you, but the ones that can really tell you what makes a hit is the record buyers. The people that listen to the radio, and not the guy that plays on the records. For the most part. I remember when we cut When a Man Loves a Woman, we took a vote on that album we cut that week, and I think the highest When a Man Loves a Woman was number 3. Imagine that, you know. Don't listen to musicians. You know, one thing that Rick Hall had, he had that ability to hear a great song. And I think that's what we then, all of us, tried and strive to learn how to pick and hear a great song. And it's usually a song that you could identify with yourself, put yourself in the song, and then, if it turns you on, it would probably turn other people on. And so I think that's the kind of the idea that I know I had. But Rick Hall taught me that. And he taught us most everything.
So how about, what did you look in when hiring a lead guitar player? What were you looking for in that player?
Well, just different styles. I was fortunate enough to work with some of the really good ones like Eddie Hinton. I don't know if anybody remembers Eddie Hinton. Eddie was a great guitar player, as well as Dwayne Allman. We worked with them in the early years. Pete came from that band. And Pete, I'll tell you what, Pete Carr became one of the better players we ever worked with.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And, but I have nothing but admiration for this guy on my left, though, I'll tell you that.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's been a tremendous amount of people come up since then. I like this pardon my pause here for the cause, because I had a breakdown there. But anyway, what was the question?
Just like guitar players.
Other guitar players that we like, the guy was named Tippy Armstrong. Anybody remember him? Tippy played on some great records, and then Pete wound up taking his spot, and I'll tell you, and Wayne Perkins was in a little different style. He was more of a rock and roll player out of Birmingham, and he was tremendous. He played a lot in California and L.A., and but he was a tremendous player.
All right. Well, I have one final question for all of you, and then we'll open and see if anybody else would like to ask a question. But just the last round, just from the top of your head, I guess, is there any memorable session or maybe something funny or extraordinary that happened during the session that you could maybe recall and share with the audience? Just some memorable session, something that meant a lot to you maybe? Or...
Yeah, I would say some of my most impressive sessions that I was impressed with were ones like Paul Simon, Bob Seger, got to really like his stuff. Rod Stewart was impressive because it was so different, rock and roll. Willie Nelson, I liked that session. Loving You Is Wrong, that turned out to be a great little record. That guy was good. Now, he happened to be one of the guys I talked to later that he did think. He said, everybody asked me who plays on that song. You really helped that song. Well, I thank you about that. And I said, well, I appreciate it. You know, I think.
Did you get a Cadillac?
Pete, you played a great part on that record.
Thank you, thank you. And I would say playing in Central Park with Simon and Garfunkel, that was a great thing. And other things that you wouldn't even think about, like Bobby Wammack, the guy that wrote Mercy, Don Covey. He wrote Mercy, Mercy, Have Mercy. And I always loved that song. And just getting to play on a record that he sang on and wrote, was important to me. I thought, wow, that guy did that. He's part of history, you know. And that's just to start off. I mean, it goes on. I'd say 90% of them impressed me, you know. They were pretty good, you know. I got something out of all of it.
You know, George Jackson, you were talking about George from Memphis. We wound up signing George as a writer after Rick. He had worked for Rick for about 5 years. And one day he called me and he says, man, I got this rock and roll song I just wrote. And I'm going, rock and roll song? I mean, we wanted George for our blues and R&B, you know, and let's cut that one first and get it out of the way, you know. Guess what the song was? Old time rock and roll.
Can I elaborate on that?
And
Jim?
you know, we did not know who that was for, because George was singing it. And you know, so what we did, David Hood and I pulled in Dennis Gully from Jackson Highway to let him sing it. So said, find out who this song is for. So Dennis come in and sing the song, right? And as he's putting his voice on the first time through, David Hood and I look at each other and say, Bob Seger, just like that. We knew immediately. Well, we sent it to him, and Bob flipped out and cut it. And guess what? He used our demo. And the demo, see, we always played on our own demos for our writers. So, if you cut one of our demos and used it for the track, it was just like hiring us, to do it. And so it was an interesting record. And but there was something unusual happened. Bob started going to Europe and was playing weekends. And he'd come back. He didn't like staying all night and being away from his family. So he'd come back on a Sunday night and then go back Monday, for the next weekend, or leave out Wednesday. And but anyway, the first time he went to Brussels, Belgium, he played old time rock and roll, and the next 3 nights, Paris, Brussels, and London. Well, when he first played it the first time in Brussels, he said that there was 10,000 kids standing in their seats. All 10,000 was standing in their chair. And said when they got to the end of the hook, at the end, where it repeat end, said every one of them was singing the words. I mean, it was unbelievable. And so they were so shook up, the producer and Bob, they said, man, we can't use this demo for this. I mean, they had never tested out a song before it came out on the record. And so they came back, and so they booked 3 different times. They came to the studio, if you remember, Pete, and they came back 3 different trips over a period of about 5 or 6 months, and spent probably $50,000, $60,000 trying to recut that song. And I remember that that song, of course, is one of the biggest in our history. Still, the number 1 was When a Man Loves a Woman, but...
Last standard song out of Muscle Shoals.
Yep.
Old time rock and roll.
That's right. And, but anyway, any other?
Yeah. Thank you, Jimmy. That was great. All right, one more for Travis, and I'm pretty sure that was one of your most favorite sessions too. Is when Little Richard came down here, because obviously, I guess it started a long relationship between the two of you, and he cut one of your songs too.
Yeah, me and Junior Lowe had just written this song about 2 weeks before Richard came to the studio. We didn't know he was coming to the studio, but we wrote this song, Greenwood, Mississippi. And we said, you know what? Man, this is a cross between Little Richard and Creedence Clearwater, And 2 weeks later, Little Richard walks in the door. And I said, hey, man, we've got a song that we've written that would be great for you. And I had to cut the demo. And he said, I want to hear it. So I took him out to my truck, put the little cassette tape in there, and he listened to it. He said, I want to record that. So I went in, I told Rick Hall, I said, Little Richard wants to do Greenwood, Mississippi. So we started the session, and about 30 minutes into the session, I could see Richard. He kept looking over at me, and he kept shaking his head. And finally, he come out of the vocal booth, and he come over, he said, he always stuttered. He said, Travis, where's that music cat that you was singing on? I said, well, Richard, that's a demo. He said, I want to sing on your music. So I went and told Rick, I said, he wants to sing on my demo track. Rick wasn't too happy, but that's what we ended up doing, put Little Richard on my demo track of Greenwood, Mississippi. 2 weeks later, Tom Jones comes in. He comes in, first thing he said, I heard Little Richard recorded here. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, and he recorded one of my songs. What was it? Greenwood, Mississippi. I want to hear it. Same thing, take him out to the truck, one by little cassette. Heard it, he said, I want to do it. So we recorded it on Tom Jones. I'll tell everybody, you know, I've never had a #1 song, but I figured Greenwood, Mississippi, two of the greatest rock and roll singers ever, Little Richard, Tom Jones.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Carl.
Glenn Fry passed away recently. He did an album of Muscle Shoals sounds, can you relate any stories from those sessions?
Glenn Fry.
Well, he did about 3 albums. Oh, Mike. You know, we do use mics here. And, but Glenn Fry had been coming down doing his single projects with us. And I remember I was on the road with Amazing Rhythm Aces, their producer, and we were fronting for them. And so I got to go out with them as the Eagles were doing their major tour of the United States. But anyway,
You have any story of Glenn Fry recording in Muscle Shoals?
Well, other than some of the really cool songs that he did, we did, like I said, 3 albums. I can't remember exactly what songs they were. Do y'all remember? I think we cut maybe 2 or 3 pretty good hit records for him, and but he was a really great artist to work with, and we really had a great time working with him.
Any other questions? George?
Jimmy, what was it like to do the live recordings that you did with Traffic and also with the Amazing Rhythm Aces? How's the difference there in the studio?
Well, the group Traffic, you know, we were lucky enough to go out on the road with them for a couple of tours, a European and then a U.S., and that was quite a deal. I remember we went out and did a.
I'll get him next.
Oh, and the group Traffic, you know, had Stevie Winwood, and we had Jim Capaldi, Chris Wood, and Rebop Quackawa, and they were probably the most Ivy League type band that in the world at that time, and they were in the top 5 of the bands, and that was a really great experience for us. Matter of fact, we came off of a Traffic tour when Paul Simon first came into the studio, and we come back after all that tour, and we had a little problem in the building. There was 30 leaks in the building. Water was leaking through the roof. We had one of those built-up roofs, and back then, if you had a problem with a leak, you had to have at least 2 weeks of dry weather in order to do the tar on the roof. And so this was in the spring, April showers, and we get there, and we figured that Paul Simon, here we go, we had to buy these little trash cans to catch the water. And right over the console was the worst leak. And at night, we just cover it in plastic, which got us through. But we had a problem during the day when it rained. And the only thing we could come up with was extra wide Kotex. And we bought every box in the whole Shoals area, and we would thumbtack it to the top, and it was raining all day. And we would have to change the Kotex about every hour. It was really some unbelievable things happening. And we thought, you know, boy, Simon's gonna flip out, you know. Guess what he thought? He said, this is esoteric. And so I guess we felt like we got through that one. You remember that?
Stop the leak.
But we got pictures of Paul, you know, during the session, and they got these little trash cans catching the water, you know. And we used to take toilet paper and put in there so that it wouldn't go plunk, you know. But it worked out. We got the roof fixed, too.
Y'all didn't cut that raindrops falling on my head over there.
Max Russell, you got a question?
Who's the mysterious guitar player on Old Time Rock and Roll? Is that Screaming Lee?
Okay, interesting situation there. We had a guy, a kid from Texas that was on vacation and with his parents, and they pulled up at our back door. And the kid comes in the back door, didn't even come to the front, just come to the back door, and he's getting on my nerves. And I said, "Hey, buddy, what can I do for you?" He said, "I want to play on a record." And it just hit me in such a way. Normally, I'd have told him where to go. It just hit me in such a way, I told him to go get his GD guitar. And he did. He goes outside, his mother and daddy, and got the motor running, and you know, it's hot out there. And they popped the trunk, and he comes in with the guitar. I had the assistant engineer hook up the amp. We had to pay the SOB. He could play. He's on the record. One thing I didn't do, we didn't put his name on the record. About 8 years later, I get a call from Punch Andrews, who's Bob Seger's manager. He said, "Man," he said, "I don't know, man." He said, "This guy comes in and said he played on Old Time Rock and Roll." I said, "Howie? Howie McDonald?" He said, "That's him." And I said, "Punch, I got news for you. He's on there." And so what he wanted was a gold record, and Punch made him one.
Over there.
Yeah, this is for Travis. The transition between you and Calvin, Little Richard, was that pretty seamless or what?
Yeah, I developed a fear of flying, and I was done. And so Kelvin, we just worked. Kelvin's a great player, so he went aboard. I had put the Little Richard's band together for him, and so when I quit, Wayne Chaney took over the band leader, and we had Kelvin in there, and they kept on rocking, and up to Richard's not able to perform anymore. He's crippled in a wheelchair, but yeah, that was some good rock and roll days. We went all over the world, and what a singer.
Any other questions?
Are there, which you may not want to tell this, but are there any musicians that were absolute jerks? That they were too fussy or picky and you didn't want to work with them anymore?
Only one I can think of was an artist. You remember the Cajun fiddler? Kershaw. Doug Kershaw, Buddy Killen brought him, was going to do an album on him, and he had been on 90 straight one-nighters and was peeled to the gill. And strangely enough, most people would come to us, they wouldn't be drinking or pilling or nothing. I mean, they come there for a serious job, trying to get their career started, restarted, whatever. And we never had a problem with that. But he came peeled to the gill, and we started taking the chord chart, the first song on the Monday morning. And as soon as he would give us the chart, we'd go print it out, we'd play it down, and then he'd forget what he did. We never got one song cut the whole day. Finally, Buddy just had to punt. He said, "Guys, I hate to do this, but we're going to have to call it off." But at one point, we thought he was going to stab all of us. I mean, with a knife he had.
Time to call it off.
But then before he left, though, he made a nice statement and said, "You guys must be better than you're acting right now." Says, "Because you'd all done well for yourself." And so he kind of, forgave us.
Over there.
When you were talking
That's a good way to say it, I would say. I mean, it is that kind of feeling because I guess it's self-grandizement, I don't know. You know, when we would hear those playbacks, there was nothing I don't think would turn me on much more than that.
And we feel that, and we understand it, and we sort of share.
Remember Take a Letter, Maria?
Yeah.
That was the first song we did at 3614 when we opened up and left Rick's place. And we got it in one take, first take. One take.
We share that feeling, that love. We're so proud of you guys, and we're so proud that you're still with us. And
Me too. I think we're getting short though, I'll tell you.
It's people like y'all that keep us going.
the thing that I wanted to actually ask about was, there are so many photographs that we have seen that are part of your lives, and one of the most iconic photographs is of Cher standing out in front of the studio with all of you guys. And I wanted to know if you would be willing to share a little bit about that relationship and those sessions.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. One of the interesting thing was, you remember, I don't know if you ever drove by the old studio, and there'd be that back porch back there off the control room. It'd be like 20 people out on that porch, and it might be 20 degrees, and it might be 100. But guess what we were doing there? We were listening to playbacks. That's where we listened to playback. That was the sweet spot. We'd like get it out from the speaker, and it was aimed a different direction, but that was the perfect mono right there. And we'd be listening to the takes that we just made. But we got accused of having orgies, everything. I mean, you can't imagine how bad it was in the beginning. I remember the first time the police came by there when we were first opening the studio up, they wanted to know if we had a license to do dances there. We said, what? We said, this is a recording studio. And they said, a recording station? What's that? They didn't know. But anyway, it wound up that we found out that the most important people in the area, besides the people, were the cops and the bankers. If you get past those two, you got it made in our area. If the cops okay you and the bankers like you, you're in good shape.
All right. Well,
Well, are you done?
we got a couple more. Okay, Carol.
Okay. I know that I've grown up and I've been like in tears almost this whole time because I'm so proud of you guys and everything. But how has it been to have just stayed here, stayed through it? And I know you've done your lives outside and travels and so forth, but you've stayed the course in Muscle Shoals or Sheffield or wherever you live. What's it like to have this new rebirth of Muscle Shoals music and the recognition that you're getting now? How has it affected you? And I applaud you for all of it, but how has it affected you? Anyone can take that question.
Well, it's kind of put Muscle Shoals back on the map again. A lot of people, younger generation that had never heard of all the stuff. All of a sudden, it's you got your documentary, and then you got, everybody universally. They're pushing Muscle Shoals again. So it's nothing but good. Makes me feel good.
One thing that I love is that some of you guys have been coming back. Like Pete, Norbert Putnam moved back a couple of years ago. Randy McCormick is back here. Milton Sledge, I hope that keeps on going that way. It's beautiful, kind of circle kind of thing for me as a fan to have you all be here.
One unusual thing about all of us is that when I first got into the business, almost all of us felt like we'd have to move to London, New York, or LA to do what we wanted to do. And didn't any of us want to do that. So for some reason, they came to us. The people came to us. And most of the time, when you became in the music industry, you had to go where it was happening. No more. They come to you if you're giving them what they want. It worked for us.
But people would hear like a hit on the radio and say, wow, where's that cut at? And that was a big influence about getting people. That was like an advertisement. I mean, with
You know, there was a
Panelist.
period in the 70s that I don't even know how many people are aware of this, but there was a time when 3614, during the 70s, about every 2 or 3 months, and you know, a chart came out every week, right? Okay, I'm talking about Billboard, Cashbox, and Record World. And sometimes our studio would have 10% of the Hot 100. Is that ridiculous?
That's where we got the name hit recording capital of the world.
It is, yeah.
We got another question of you.
It's been pretty much 50 years since you created this recording industry here. How much pride do you have in the fact that it's still going and that maybe it's well known as ever? Yeah.
What was the question?
About the length of time, you know. I'll tell you what, it's been an amazing trip, and the fact that we're still, in some ways, still doing it, and the old hits are still surviving. I mean, of course, a lot of it's old-time radio, but some of these hits will never die.
Oh, absolutely.
But you know, I tell everybody, I do 90% covers, but I do them my way. And I play for the money people. That's y'all. It's not the young ones. They got their music, which I can remember growing up. My parents, you know, when rock and roll came out, ooh, son, please, I don't want to hear that. Go somewhere else. But, you know, we done made the circle. And here we are, and our kids, they into this other stuff, that's cool. But Mom and Daddy's the ones that gives them the money to go buy the stuff. So I'm hanging with my oldie but goodies and all the good hits and stuff that we grew up listening to. That's where I'm at.
But let me say something real quick, and you might not even be that, it might not be that obvious to you, but what you did influenced so many people, like in my generation. There are guys now like the Black Keys that's like pretty much ripping you off. I mean, they heard that kind of sound and making it their own. So in many ways, your music is as much young people's music. Yeah. I mean, for myself, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of young ones that are getting into the music that we did, which is awesome. They kind of doing a little bit different twist on it, which is cool.
Oh, we got a final question from Jerry McGee.
Jimmy Johnson, tell him about Jerry Wexler's big surprise the first time he came in, and what he was expecting.
I tell you, Jerry Wexler scared the hell out of us. We had never heard a vocabulary on a human like that. And I remember when we'd go to New York, I'd carry a dictionary with me to see what the hell he was saying, But he was an amazing guy. He kind of, for some unknown, thank God, reason, he took us under his wing, and he became, the four of us, more like our dad, than anything, second dad. And even till the time he died, we were very close to him. Jerry had an interesting thing. He was agnostic. And when he would get sick or something, I would always tell him, we're going to pray for him. And he would say, don't do that. And I'd say, Jerry, but I want to. And I remember one time he had a heart valve, maybe replacement that was coming up, in New York. And so he was getting really shook up about that. And so I said, Jerry, I want you to know that we're going to all be praying for you down here. And you know what he told me? He said, Jimmy, I'd appreciate that if y'all would. I could not believe he told me that. And I was so glad to hear it.
All right, well,
Yeah, talking about Wexler, he signed me and Lenny. We had fallen to Atlantic. when he was down one time producing some sessions, I brought a tape in that I just produced on Lenny. He looked at it and looked at us and took it back, and a week later we had a record deal. So he had some influence, that's for sure.
That was Falling, was it not? Falling?
Yeah,
Thank you.
that ball in.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Jamie, Travis, and Pete, for sharing your story.
Welcome.